All right, and we are live for the Limitless Roofing CEO show. All right, we're live with our special guest today, Brad Barron. He's the CEO of Cornerstone Construction. He's got some really cool stuff to share today. So, Brad, thanks for joining the show, man.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here. COO. It's not a CEO, but COO. Yeah, no worries. Super excited to be here. Excited to share some stuff today and chat with you.
Yeah, the way this started was I think you had left some comments on something in a post I made inside of our Limitless Roofing CEO group. And I thought, wow, this guy's he has feedback for operations, feedback for processes. And I think I threw a question out there like, what's the biggest challenge or something? I don't know. But you commented and I thought, hey, would you like to be on our show? You have really good feedback. And then as we talked, you let me, you shared your story, and now you're the COO of Cornerstone Construction, which for those of you listening, that's the company that Hunter Ballou owns. Hunter also founded RoofCon. Cornerstone Construction is up to 7 locations at the time of the recording of this podcast. Very successful business, really a good template for how to be successful in the roofing industry and how to scale to multiple locations. So I was really excited to have Brad on, and we're going to get into the best advice for scaling and growing well. We're going to get into what you call the race to 15 salesmen. We're going to unpack how scaling depends on solid processes and stuff like that. So before we dig into all that, Brad, if you could just kind of share your background, how did you get into this business?
Yeah, man. So came back from a deployment in late 2017, deployed to the Horn of Africa, and came back and got a job in early 18 with Home Depot Exteriors. So that was an outside sales position, a division that Home Depot had at the time, doing roofing, siding, gutters, windows, and like attic insulation and stuff. And so was sitting in customers' homes, 100% retail. Didn't work with any insurance, which is obviously a huge part of the roofing industry at large. And so, I didn't know how to read an insurance scope or do anything. It was kind of an interesting thing. I come tell you, hey, Mr. McCabe, I've got this $14,000 roof you can buy, and insurance is going to save you 10. Isn't that great? It's still going to cost you 4 or 5 though. And as you can imagine, that was really hard to sell against, and still did okay. But Home Depot ended up, I think, as a whole, it was hard to sell against the restoration industry, and they shut the whole division down in February of 19. And I left just a couple months before that in December, went to work for a local restoration company that had come and done my roof, actually. So they came and knocked on the door, and I said, well, hey, I'm selling roofing. I know what I'm looking for. I'm knowing what I want to see installed and things like that. And so I'm going to make sure they do it right. I don't really care who does it, since I can watch them. And so that kind of introduced me to the restoration industry. Ended up going to work for them, and man, it was just was everything. This company was everything stereotypical about the roofing industry. So dude in a back office, it's smoke filled, and he's got his like leather jacket on and his hair slicked back and a pinky ring. And 100% chucking a truck, but I didn't know it at that point. And but it gave me a lot of room to start watching videos from folks like Becca and Adam Benson and things like that, and start learning stuff on YouTube and say, well, why aren't we doing this supplement process? Or why are we taking money for trades that we're not doing? Because we're just saying, you just give us all the insurance money, and that's how this works. And so that really started kind of my learning and really digging in. And I think it's really paid off, because even as like a salesman starting out, I started really digging into what's the higher level knowledge that goes into doing this, and how do we do this the right way, and how do we get the most value out of it? How do we make it as profitable as possible? And then actually left the industry, went to language school with the Army in 2019 to learn to speak Arabic. Took a position with Joint Special Operations Command on Fort Bragg in early 2020. That fell through with COVID, and partially COVID and partially just some personalities and things like that. And that position just didn't work out. And so then I was kind of scrambling, honestly, like COVID had hit, nobody knows what's going to happen. Came across a post from Cornerstone. Like one of my cousins is real good friends with a girl here, and shared a post, and Hunter and I started talking, and it kind of just went from there, man. Just We spent 2 or 3 months kind of talking to each other, went and launched the Little Rock market for Cornerstone, got it up to scale pretty quickly and really got it humming. And then just as we, or as Hunter, I guess, and at the time started looking at, how do we structure the company for future growth and what makes sense. I got, honored enough to get asked to step up and kind of take a different role, obviously. And that kind of brings us to where we're at right now, I guess. Yeah.
So there's so much I want to highlight about that, but let's just jump on some main points here. You got into the industry working through Home Depot. Then you go and work for this company that, it's a stereotypical, almost to the extreme scenario of a roofing owner.
Even that I didn't mention, like this dude had done, as we got into it, had done 16 months for a kickback scheme in New Orleans on some contracts. And that's what sent him to Little Rock, I think, ultimately. So yeah, just on and on the stereotype. But anyways. Yeah.
Wonderful. Right. Why are you expanding in different markets? Well, because I'm a criminal in the last one.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you start learning about the storm restoration industry. You've got an inquisitive mind and you're entrepreneurial enough to think about how to grow a business. And so you're thinking, how do we do this? Well, how do we incorporate that? Why aren't we doing this? You're starting to think that way. And then through some connections, you come across Hunter's path. Now, the cool thing about Hunter is he's got a lot of irons in the fire, but he's also accessible.
Yeah, sure.
And he's a very relational guy. He's so high relationally as a leader, makes him such a strong leader. But for people listening to this, they're thinking, okay, Brad got a job at a very successful roofing company. And then Brad got the opportunity to go basically be over a branch, over one of those 7 locations. So what did that conversation look like? I mean, obviously you've got experience in the military, you've got experience in Home Depot, and thank you for your service, by the way.
Yeah.
So what did that look like? How did you kind of sell yourself to the owner of a roofing company? Because there's a lot of sales guys listening to this going, well, I'd love to run a branch, but how do I get that opportunity?
Yep. So I think you hit a couple of things right on the head. When you look at Hunter being relational and like his passion for developing people and giving people opportunities, his passion for moving with speed. He talks like the idea of, fail fast. Whatever it is you're going to do it quickly. And if it doesn't work out, then iterate and do it again. Right. And so that's his mentality for sure. And that's, kind of keys in. We talk relational and building people and mentoring goes right into RoofCon and Revolt and all that kind of stuff. Is just a passion of his. But yeah, it started with a Facebook message. I mean, I was out doing some handyman work with a guy. That's kind of what I was doing to pay the bills after getting let go from that other job. And, sent Hunter a message one day on May 9th, sent him a message. 15 minutes later, he responds and says, "Hey brother, what's a good number to call you on?" And so that was our first phone call that day. About 5 minutes in, he said, "Well, why aren't you just starting your own company? Like, why aren't you just do this?" And I was like, "Well, I've thought about it. I've got a logo drawn up. I've got some ideas, but, I said, man, the licensing and the back end admin and the insurance and like I want to lead and I would love to do something, but I don't know that for me, I care about having my name on it. If I can have my own office and I can build a team and I can lead, guide, and direct, like that's enough for me. I don't need the headache of everything else." And so we talked a little bit. I came down to Greenville, rode with a couple guys. We talked some more. And then I actually went to Colorado to work with another buddy that was starting a company in Denver. I had worked with him between language school and North Carolina. And so for just like a couple months, had met this guy and worked out there. He was starting his own company. So I went to work with him in June of 2020. And I honestly, like Hunter says, "Well, hey, because I was like, man, if you never messaged me back, I don't know this would have happened." But he said, "Well, hey, you took the risk first." So yeah, okay, I messaged Hunter first. But honestly, I got inside my head and was like, man, this guy, he started this $10 million roofing company. He's got this national conference he does. He's like 29 years old. I've just lost my job. I'm trying to pay the bills. I don't need to bother this guy, but, and all of a sudden while I'm in Colorado, he reaches back out to me and says, "Hey, how's life?" And it kind of went from there. Like we spent the next couple of days talking about Little Rock more. Because I said, that's where I was before we left school. That's where I know the market. That's already know crews I can call. I know the distributors. I, had all these relationships, and I know some guys I can hire right off. And that's just what made sense. I mean, he invited me to a sales retreat that he did with the Cornerstone team in mid-July. which is July like 9th through the 12th. And a week later, we were in Little Rock launching the market. And so I think the conversation was just, to salesmen that are out there, yourself, if you can, you understand adjuster meetings and you can walk on the roof and pick out items that need to be supplemented, and you know how to correctly read a scope and break it down and take the right money and not the wrong money. If you have trained other guys that have come after you and you've helped build them up to help them understand, and you've got a city, you want to go launch a market, and your owners, I think it's just impressing upon them that you know what you're talking about. I don't think you have to be $1 million salesman. And that honestly is one of my biggest pet peeves in this industry, is companies that the default mode is that, oh, let's take our $1 million producer and turn him into a manager. Just because that guy can sell has no bearing on his ability to lead. Now, there are plenty of good salesmen that may be able to lead, but one does not equal the other, right? Like, that dude may be a killer on the doors, but if he's not willing to take the time to mentor and train other people, then he has no business being a manager, and you're just cutting yourself off because now you've taken him away from selling, right? So there goes all your revenue. So just that's, I get on a bit of a soapbox about that, because I think you just see it in a lot of companies where that's just the default guy, and maybe he's excited about it, maybe he thinks he's ready for it, but if you're not doing some actual analysis and you're just like, oh yeah, he sold $1 million this year, or $1.5 million, that doesn't mean he's your next leader, so.
No, that's good. That's really good stuff. And you cut out for a minute there, but
Sorry.
yeah, I think that's something that happens a lot. You take these guys that are pure hunters and you turn them into managers.
Yep.
You take somebody out of a situation where they're really using their unique ability, and it's just not good. So, so for getting into what you do now, and obviously Hunter is the owner of the company, having a lot of employees, he could size up your past experience, your proven leadership, along with your personality and your wiring. Now he assessed that it was worth taking a risk on you to go start a market. So you started a market, and I know you guys are very strategic. I know you and I talked about how you guys had a week-long leadership meeting there where you had your whole leadership team. You guys are going through everything from compensation plans to sales strategies to numbers to goals, all that stuff. You guys are very strategic. You're a great model of how to build a successful company. And so let's get into kind of the three major things I want to get into with you on this show. And I've got my notes here over on the right. And one of the things we talked about was how the best advice, I said, what's your best advice for anybody that wants to scale and grow? And you answer with a few things. You talked about that leadership planning week, organization structure, bonus structure, and so forth. But let's get into that. What's the best advice you have for other companies listening now? You're the COO of Cornerstone. What if you had 5 minutes with them, what would you say?
I think so. If I'm curious, if I said here's the best piece a few weeks ago, if I would say the same thing now or not, if I remember exactly what the same thing was. But I think that I think there's a handful of things that are key, but I think the number one is like understanding the back end data and processes, which is still maybe not an exact single thing. Did your pods die, or am I out?
I'm good.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I think understanding what your numbers are and what your metrics are to get you to success. Like, how do you recognize, like, really broad, but like some of the things we talked about, we know what our average roof is worth. We know what we expect a salesman to sell in a month. We know what the minimum quantity is. So in turn, we know how many salesmen we've got to have in a market in order to hit the revenue goals for that market. And so doing that back end diligence, and it's not even super tight numbers. It's fairly rough, but it's again, we know, we can pull from our CRM. Here's the average contract price, year over year. And then divide that out across how many per month per salesman. And then, okay, how many salesmen do we need in a market? And then you definitely have got to have the repeatable processes. I mean, that's if you don't have a training process that translates into a new market with guys or girls that don't know anything about you yet, then you can't jump off that cliff and go into a new market. I mean, how are you going to, essentially franchise what you've done in your primary market into a new one, if you don't have that stuff codified and written down somewhere. So I think those are two of the biggest things. Yeah.
So let's camp out on that. And for those of you watching live, my AirPod Pros decided to disconnect, and so I couldn't hear Brad. So now I've got my big chunky headphones on. But what we've had a lot of questions inside the Limitless CEO Facebook group, and a lot of the questions have been around the same topic, which is, how do you find good people? How do you hire good people? Or I'll post when I invite new members to the group, I'll say, what's your biggest challenge in business today? And they'll say, finding and keeping the right people. So kind of talk about, as far as your structure, I know you guys are very intentional about going through all the things that you need to go through for annual planning.
Yep.
But how do you do hiring? What has worked for you guys and what has not worked for you guys?
Yep. Yeah. So what we're doing is we have an ad. We use ZipRecruiter as the platform. And I think that just compared to maybe Monster or Indeed or Facebook or whatever, we feel like the value of folks that are on there. Maybe it's, I don't know if it's a socioeconomic group or whatever, if different websites market themselves or kind of get picked up by different crowds, and the kind of what's the average you see of folks using that site and that platform to find jobs. We feel like ZipRecruiter works well for us. But then it's a very intentional funnel. So when they apply on ZipRecruiter, there's then another site that we direct them to as a part of our recruiting funnel. There's some videos there, a personality test, a phone screen, and then a face-to-face after that, if everything else is still falling into place. And that's some more insight into that with some of our masterminds and stuff, without saying necessarily like too much about it. But yeah, it's the key is that not necessarily what the specifics of it are, but that it's a funnel. I think that's the key thing, is that it's not every single person that applies on whatever site you're using. But if they haven't taken those extra 2 or 3 steps that tell them about the job, by the time they watch those videos, a number of those objections have already been dealt with, right? It's a 1099. We don't have a lot of benefits to offer you. You got to use your own vehicle, and we have options past that. Like, we have a truck program and things like that. But initially, right, you're driving your own vehicle. But we talk through all that. You got to knock doors. You got to do, And so if they still proceed to sign up with the phone screen and want to talk to somebody, at that point, they already know a good bit about the job. And so that filters out a lot of time that we're not having to waste on people that just saw an ad that said, hey, you can make $90,000 to $100,000 a year selling roofs, because every Yahoo that, that thinks they can do it is going to apply to that, right? Because that's a lot of money, and you can make that kind of money. But there's some catches, right? It's 1099. You got to have your own vehicle. You got to knock doors. You're going to be outside. You can't be afraid of heights, whatever the case may be. And so, yeah, I think that's the key, is having that funnel there is huge for hiring with us. And then obviously once you get them in, again, if you don't have the training and the systems and the processes to back that up and to make them want to stay, and if your corporate culture doesn't make them want to stay, well, then it's not so much an attraction but retention problem, right? I mean, that you start, was it not the right person, or did you not have the right stuff in place to retain a guy that could have been a killer? Is it them or is it you? And if you're constantly having a problem, I mean, it's just like a dating relationship, right? If you're always the one that's having relationship problems and everybody else around you is getting hitched, maybe it's you instead of them. And so if you just can't retain people, rather than thinking that the 50 people that came through your office in the past year were not a good fit, maybe you got some stuff to work on.
Right. It's like that song, I'm looking at the man in the mirror.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
If you've got more problems with everybody else than you do yourself, you
and it's
might
not
want
to
to
say
take
it's
them
not surmountable. Again, it may not be anything that's wrong with your personality. Like, you may care about people and you may be a great person of integrity and whatever, but if you just don't know how to design training, or you don't know how to communicate it to other people, or create a repeatable process, or it's not that you don't have the money to pay your people. You're not stealing from them, but you don't know how to manage cash flow to where you can get commissions to them, or whatever the problem is that you're having issues with, whether it's joining a mastermind, whether it's, buying into some training program or whatever, getting on some coaching calls or something. Again, it may be you. Like maybe there's something you need to step up to help line out that side of your business if you just can't seem to find any success getting people on,
Definitely. And we all need to develop as leaders. You never arrive, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're all a mixture of our character, our vision, our skills, and the health of our relationships. And
absolutely.
so
And
that's
I
so
think
good.
that's something like important to say too. Like, okay, we have RoofCon and we have Revolt, and we're at a point where we're teaching other roofing companies how to do it. But Hunter will buy into a training program faster than almost anyone. I mean, we've got Ryan Groth, we've got Becca Switzer, we've got Dale Childers, we've got Sam Taggart. So we're doing a lot of stuff on our own now that we've reached this point, but we didn't just get here by just knowing how to do this, right? Like he's spent a lot of time investing into those programs and a lot of money investing into those to get this company to where it's at and to equip the sales team with everything they need to be successful. And that's something we tell guys in interview too. We give you all the tools, training, and support to make $100,000 a year, but we can't give you the work ethic. Like we'll give you everything we can, but we cannot give you work ethic. And we want to be able to say that if you quit on us and when you walk out the door, we want to be able to sleep at night confident that we gave you absolutely every opportunity to be successful, and you let yourself fail, that you chose not to do it. And because it keeps us up. I mean, we've already gone through a couple guys in the Little Rock market. We've retained most of them since, we hadn't been there all that long, but Hunter will tell you it keeps him up nights when a guy quits. I mean, it's such an opportunity, and we feel like there is great money to be made and a great culture. And so when a guy just quits on us, or can't make it work, it's we get in our feels about it a little bit. It's frustrating. Like, what did we miss? That didn't make it successful for that guy. So, yeah.
So let me ask you this question, because this is something a lot of people deal with. And I've heard this from pretty much every owner I've talked to at length about their sales guys. How do you retain sales guys? And how do you keep from hiring guys that think, well, I've been doing this for about 2 years and I'm pretty easy to run the numbers. If I were off on my own, I would be making a lot more money.
Sure.
And then you lose one of your best sales guys. So how do you do that? How do you retain that talent? Or what's your, we don't need to camp out on this for the next 10 minutes, but I'm just really curious how you guys deal with that challenge.
On the one hand, we obviously want to retain those guys, and whether or not we're looking at kind of the ancillary benefits, the truck program, the, clothing and iPads and retreats and, all the stuff that hopefully makes it worth it beyond just the basic commish. And then the second thing we do is we instituted a team leader program. So it's something that Hunter's developed and started last year. Once you're kind of, what you're doing, you've been on for 3, 4, 5 months, you can start getting guys under you and making 2% off of them. So now if I'm $1 million salesman making a percentage and $100,000 a year, and then I've got 5 guys under me that are each $1 million guys, that's another $100K. Now I'm making 200. Well, okay, maybe it looks a lot less, attractive to go, again, just like me, take on that headache of starting a new company. Like, I'm making plenty of money. I've got some quote unquote passive income, because once that guy is trained, I'm still earning from him. Right. And so, yeah, so that's I think a big thing for us to have that. But then on the other hand, like, I would say even with all that, we do that to retain, but I think we're also okay. Like, look, man, like, we want to foster an entrepreneurial spirit, and we want you to set your own sales. And ultimately, whether it's roofing or another business, if you come here and you learn and you grow, and for you that's starting your own thing, like, we're okay with that too. Like, like we want people that want to be here. And it's something I had an Army mentor tell me this, as a young lieutenant, like, give the other guys everything you can that you've developed, so as we're developing products in the military for briefings or training or whatever, right, you're technically competing with all the other lieutenants with you to get promoted to the next rank or the next position or whatever. who cares? Like, give them everything, because it's mine and I'm still going to be better than you're going to be. Like, I'm going to do my thing better than you're going to do it. And if I give it to you, it just causes me to iterate and have to get better again. Right. So that product was old, that strategy or that tool was old. Now I just got to come up with a better one, and so it constantly pushes you to get better as well.
That's good. I mean, that kind of servant leadership where you truly are focused on empowering and equipping others
Yeah.
is going for most people, all that's going to do is create more loyalty. So I just love that, because those guys are they are going to want to stay, to be part of a great culture, to be part of a great program where there is upward mobility, where there is incentive. There's also a great culture. There's trust. There's a lot of good things happening there. And it's hard to go recreate that. I mean, just because somebody does sales at Cornerstone doesn't mean they can go create a mere example of Cornerstone. There's a lot of things you guys are doing really well that create that unique experience. So, well, let's get into to another thing we talked about, which was the race to 15 salesmen.
Yep.
You guys have clearly, you haven't only moved in one other market or two other markets. At the time of the recording of this episode, you're in 7 markets and you're doing it well. And one of the things you told me, the big challenge is processes start to break when you scale.
Yep.
So first, I want to ask you, what are the processes that you guys really focus on so that they don't break? And then next we'll get into what's that race to 15 like.
Yep. Yeah. So with processes breaking, I mean, again, it's like, if you've got the person in the office that does onboarding, right, and they're filling out paperwork or taking photos for a business card or email signature, whatever the case may be. And we saw that, like, even with our first couple markets, only an hour and a half, 2 hours out of Greenville, they didn't necessarily break, right? But once we launched Little Rock and we're 10 hours away, well, now those people can't drive back to Greenville to onboard. And that's what we were still doing. Like, they were coming from those markets an hour and a half away, take a day, go to Greenville, fill out your paperwork, get your photos, get some shirts, do all this, and then drive back. And so, yeah, figuring out what processes do you have in place right now that are going to break when you're more than a few hours away? And how does that look? Is it, what do you digitize? What gets done maybe locally at the new market, and all that. So I think that's all stuff that's critical to think through before you launch into that market and find out, okay, we're here and crap, we can't do any business because we forgot this step or that step, like this, we don't have access to our CRM or access to email or shirts to go out in or business cards or whatever. And so I think that's all stuff to look at. And then, yeah, the race to 15. So again, it goes back to looking at what's our revenue goal for a market. Which for us, it's kind of philosophically is $10 million a market in revenue. That's where we want to be. Obviously that can vary, we'll see over time, each market, cities are larger or smaller and things like that, your mix of commercial or residential, retail versus insurance, but that's kind of our philosophical goal. And so if we take 10 million, we divide it out by the average value of the jobs that we're doing. And then we divide that out by our minimum goal for each salesman each month, which is 5 roofs. And that puts us at 15 salesmen in a market is what gets us to $10 million. And so basically when we launch a new market, that's kind of the mandate for that branch manager. That's their first rock, is to start hiring those guys on and get to 15 as quickly as possible. Yep.
Now you threw out a word there called rock. So
yep.
that makes me, that means you guys are running on EOS.
Yeah.
So process begin to break if you don't scale. Before we move on to the race to 15, what's the best advice you can give for somebody listening that says, we've got 2 locations, we want to scale to a third that is going to be a 10-hour drive or whatever? What's the best piece of advice you could give them of a free, not a free, but a tool or a resource they should look into?
I think it's not even something to look at. I think it's creating a checklist. I think it's going down like just like creating a, again, to borrow my world military for 15 years, it's a D-90, D-60, D-30, like, 90 days out, we need to start getting, if it's a different state, right? We need the license in that state. We need to incorporate, we need the residential builder's license or commercial, whatever it's going to be, the general contractor. We need to make sure we update our workman's comp and general liability to cover multiple states. We need to order business cards. We need to get with a commercial, real estate broker, whatever it is at 90, 60, 30. And then, what do we need to take with us? A packing list of yard signs and shirts and hats and, whatever the case may be. And then obviously you got to look at your budget. Like we look at probably 30 to 40,000 to launch a market. By the time you buy shirts and hats and the initial business cards, lease an office, buy some furniture, that's kind of where we found that we're at. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is that it's a lot of things. And so you need a list. Like, come up with a list so that, again, you don't get there and you're twiddling your thumbs because, crap, we forgot to do whatever and we can't actually go sell anything,
That's good stuff. I love the analogy of the military too, because the military runs off of standard protocols for everything. And all that is a decision that's made in advance. You know exactly how you want something done. So I really like that. So you mentioned also with the Race to 15, I love that you guys, you're beginning with the end in mind. You know that to reach 2 million, you really need 15 sales guys on average doing 5 jobs a month. One of our members in our Facebook group asked a question and said, what does your commission structure look like? Is it 10% off the top and then split the profit, or, how much can you share about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's something that, I don't think there's any issue sharing it, because I think Hunter's probably talked about it at RoofCon and stuff. So we do a 12%. I think that, for 10-50-50 model, I think you'll see again in some of these various Facebook groups, kind of, a number of the larger companies that would talk about the 10-50-50 is potentially not leaving enough for the company. I guess it depends on what you do with that other 50%. Obviously, if the owner puts it in his pocket and that's how he gets paid over the course of the year, then you're absolutely not leaving enough for a company to scale to multiple markets and grow with trucks and to grow the brand and your reach and things like that, right? It's just 10% is not going to be enough. I worked under a 10-50-50 originally when I started in the industry, and was averaging probably closer to like 15-16%. So you're talking 3 to 4 points right there. There's a lot of overhead that could go into that 3 to 4 points right there, right? And but again, we're paying 2% to a team leader, and then we also, branch managers can get 1 to 2% depending on their numbers. So we're still at that 15-ish total on a job, but it's spread out. And if you're a team leader making 12% plus 2, or you're 14 anyways, it's just somebody else's 2, right? So again, we're kind of in that range, but we want to kind of frame it a different way. We want to set it up where guys are motivated to be leaders. That's the point of the whole team leader thing. Again, maybe it keeps them from doing their own thing, but we also want everybody to have the opportunity to lead and to learn how to lead people and to learn how to develop others. And there's just obviously not enough management positions to do that, right? And so having that team leader role allows for that. But straight up 12 on self-generated, 8% on company generated. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just warning you, you're going to get a lot of follow-up questions about this this video is going to be recorded in our Facebook group forever. But another question asked, somebody said, do you start new sales guys at the same pay rate as seasoned guys?
Yeah, so we do. And we're looking at doing some different stuff with, like, do we want to bring guys on as canvassers and things like that? So we're kind of rolling that out for 2021. And again, there's another opportunity to feed your seasoned sales guys that are taking the time to train someone and mentor them. And it also gets that canvasser lots of reps on the doors in the first 30, 45 days, just helping that PM set appointments and things like that. And then once they get through their training and they've generated a certain amount of leads, qualified leads, they can move to that project manager position. And that's the goal. Like, we're still hiring project managers. We're not hiring for a full-time canvas position. But we are looking at having them start out as that. Yeah.
So let's get into another aspect of all this. And I just love how you've highlighted culture is coming out a lot in this, processes, systems, and even what you said about the commission. The 10-50-50 deal is okay probably if you've got a couple of sales guys in one location, but when you want to bring in the economies of scale and all that entails, Oh boy, that's going to be challenging. So I think a lot of people
Yeah.
find that out by
And
experience.
I mean, I think what it comes down to is you've got 100 points on every job, right? And you got to know how many points are going to material, how many points are going to labor, how many points are going to the sales guy, how many points are going to overhead, and what's your net profit. And if it's a 10-50-50, it's hard to kind of ever figure out how many points the sales guy's getting. I mean, on one job, he's getting 8 or 9 because that job didn't hit, which I guess, okay, kind of protects the company in a job that didn't hit well. But we also have a 40% profit limit. So we kind of insulate ourselves there. You can't get more than 40% of the total profit on the job. So if it's just a terrible job or you sell retail too low, there's kind of that, there's a backstop. But yeah, it's hard to figure out what's my planning factor if it's a 10-50-50, because I mean, on this job, he may get 18 or 19%. On this job, he gets 11%. Like how do I plan long-term, you know?
That's so good. And I know a lot of this too. It comes from you guys taking the time to have a strategic leadership team meeting to talk about goals and stuff like that. I also know Hunter is really big on hiring the right people, having the right people in the right seat. And he did a video where I saw him talking about your CFO and his prior experience and stuff like that. So that's good stuff. So let's talk about how you mentioned rocks, and I know you guys have started to incorporate EOS. So going from what you went through in the military and knowing a lot about processes and systems, and now that is your role. I mean, you are the guy over operations. Tell us about how you guys leverage EOS to help your business thrive.
Yeah, so it's huge. I mean, we are in the early stages of it. We actually did our vision day this week, and so we sat down, and it was kind of interesting because, like, you know, we did like that comment that I posted a few months ago or a month and a half ago, and it kind of started off this whole conversation was kind of what we had sat down and done. It was kind of like a vision day, like an initial, like looking at what's 2021 look like, and what does our corporate structure need to change to, what programs do we want to roll out, what are our biggest issues right now, and we weren't maybe calling them rocks at that point, and we didn't have visionary and integrator and things like that, but yeah, we brought in EOS, and I think it reinforced some of the work we had already done, which was cool. There were some things that we didn't really change. There were different names we put to some of it, and a few different, the 5 roles under each person. For those of you that are familiar with EOS, there are a few things we moved around, but a lot of it stayed really similar. But I think what is really cool to it is, the conversations we've had after doing it is having our implementer here, and putting him kind of outside of us. And while he's in the room on a level higher than us, it put even a bunch of alpha guys and the owner of the company and CEO, COO, we're all at the table a step down from that dude. And while he's in the room, man, he freaking commands the room. I mean, he'll cut you off and he'll tell you, no, take that off your paper. That doesn't fit. That's not how that's going to, I mean, he even said this a couple times, well, you can do it that way. We're just not going to work together anymore. I'm like, so, like, I mean, he was sticking to, like, this is how EOS works. And this is why it works. And it is, hey, this has been done in 10,000 different companies. There's probably a reason that it works. And so that's how we're going to do it. And so, we actually have a guy that's getting trained as an implementer as well. We're not going to use him, but we want to be able to work with other companies doing it too. And so yeah, we're going to stick, because again, it's hard to be a prophet in your own land, right? And so we're still going to use an outside implementer for us that we like working with. But yeah, we're gonna try and start bringing that as something that we offer too, because we definitely see the value of it. I mean, I think it's well worth the money spent just to have that outside guy that, again, can put you all on an equal plane, can drive that conversation and help you pick out those rocks, and then free you up. We talk about it too, the freedom to say that, okay, of all the great ideas we've got out there, these are the 4 I'm working on this quarter. Like these, when he comes back next quarter, I don't want to have to walk into a room and tell him these didn't get done, right? And I am going to tell other people, and we're going to tell each other that when you bring something up that's not one of these, that's not this quarter. Like, that is a great idea, but I can put it on the issues board and I can take it off my plate for now because it's not what we're doing right now. And it will, I definitely think it's going to move the needle forward. And it's I can go on. It's cool. I use Michael Hyatt's Full Focus Planner as my planner every day. And it's a quarterly planner. I mean, this thing is, it's not thin, and this is 1 quarter. So I get mailed one of these every quarter, and it's kind of the same thing. Like it's basic. It's like you set annual goals, and then you set quarterly, you set your weekly big 3, and then your daily 3 comes out of that weekly 3. And so whether it's Michael Hyatt's planner or another system or EOS, at the end of the day, I mean, it's not rocket science. Like it's basic. Like you can't get to $100 million company just because you will it, right? You got to break that down into digestible blocks. And if you don't, you're just kind of rudderless, but if you can break it down into daily and weekly action steps, that's how you actually move the needle forward, and get going somewhere. And so yeah, I think EOS it's a great way to do it. It's going to be massive for us. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so good. I love the fact that you guys brought in an implementer, and to hear you say that. So a lot of people listening to this know that I'm an authorized EOS implementer, and we use EOS inside of our roofing CEO groups. But I never, when you said, he basically says we're not going to work together. So EOS worldwide is huge on you not diluting their content at all. I mean, they are fanatical about it because they're basically saying, we know this is a proven system. Keep it pure. Keep it pure. Do not dilute it with any of your own thoughts. Don't dilute it with anybody else's books. So it's so funny to hear you say that he basically said, hey, oh, that's a great idea. Put it aside. We're not using it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there was definitely a couple of things where he's like, that's great. This will be our last session together, and we just won't work together anymore if that's what you're going to do. Right?
That is so funny.
Yeah.
But it's like you said, it's not rocket science. It's a proven system. It's a roadmap. And then it just takes pig-headed stubbornness to just follow it. And I think that's the power behind EOS. When you work with an implementer, you got that implementer coming in, keeping you accountable, saying, hey, where are we? We nailed down your issues. We nailed down your goals for the next 90 days, your rocks. How are they? And looking at every person in the room. So that's so cool. I just love that you guys are using that, and you're going to use it to help others as well. So that's great. Well, we've talked about the scaling to multiple locations with processes. We've talked about goal setting and strategic planning. We've talked about sales compensation and the race to 15. And the last thing that I want you to touch on just briefly before we bring this to a close is training. What is the key to your training process?
Yeah. So, ours is, and it was developed before me. So I'm in the midst of, overhauling it, and it'll have my touch to it, by this time next year. But I don't want to take credit for setting it up by any means. But we use an online, learning management system, and some of it is videos out on a job site. Some of it is videos in the office that are screen grabs, but it's basically something that we can log a guy into. And again, it's something that Hunter will talk about. Like, I know he talked about in his breakout at RoofCon and things, and I think even from the main stage, but like it's a long line of videos that we've embedded into this system, and takes you from our mission and culture and vision all the way through, door-to-door strategies and lead generation and product knowledge and our CRM, financing, all that stuff. And so, a lot of companies will do like 2 or 3 days in the office, maybe we're hiring once a month or once a quarter, and we do like a class. We don't do any of that. I think it's something that I'd maybe like to see us do, like to give us a 1 or 2 day, like we're sure we're delivering the same quality of product for these handful of topics that we want guys to know right off the rip. But the vast majority of ours will stay in that digital platform that, again, once we onboard a guy and he's got an email address, he can log into it and go through, it's called 6-Figure Blueprint, can go through all that training from start to finish. And by the time he gets done, has a good grasp of what he needs to do, out on the streets every day and helping folks get their roofs taken care of. And then it also, because it's there, they can also come back to it at any point, right? Like, so if they don't get something in that in-person training, well, then it's just gone, right? But the video setup, they can always refer back to it. And so we have that, that's it. We have 6-Figure, and we're developing, again, when we look at processes and repeatability, we're developing 8-Figure Blueprint for managers right now. So how to turn your market into that 8-Figure Blueprint. And so all the things that we've learned along the way, And it's also something that we're white labeling to potentially bring to other folks as well. But right now it's set up for internally at Cornerstone, and yeah.
That's good stuff. Well, you guys would be a great one to white label it because you have successfully, you've done it.
Yeah.
And so you've got video training online, you got a learning management system there with follow-up, accountability, all that stuff. You also have in the field training. And then I think the other piece of it though, so I feel like most companies do one or the other. They either have, the owner has enough foresight to say, I need to give guys upward mobility and give them the hope of greater income earning potential and the ability to help others. That's good. But usually they don't have solid training in place, or they have good training, but they really don't have a strong aspect of that upward mobility and mentoring and all that. And you guys have brought both together. But I know one of the things you said, you've got the video training, and I'm looking at my notes here. You said you don't do a day or two in the office. You guys really want them to like start selling roofs within their first week.
Yeah. So, and again, does the dynamic change a little bit there if we're kind of starting this canvassing aspect prior to becoming a PM? But yes, up to this point, that has always been a goal. It's like, so you get out with whoever your team leader is going to be and start shadowing them. You got to put your knuckles on the door. The team leader is there to help you, but we want you knocking those doors day one, day two, and hopefully get your first roof in the pipeline that week, because we all know that it takes some time to generate a first paycheck, right? We don't do any draws. We don't do a training stipend. And so knock that door as quickly as possible. At the end of the day, if you knock 10 or 15 on day one with some basic objection handling, you ought to be able to get on a couple roofs. And if you're in an area where there's damage, you ought to be able to get one signed. And we generally see that guys can get one signed within their first couple of days. And so then that sets them up, within the next 10 to 14 days, that ACV check is in, and they're picking up their first check and getting some commission going. And so that's definitely our goal. We want them to feel that success and to see, what the job can pay and how it can generate income in their life and be life changing, really. Again, for a guy that's maybe made $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, to now could be able to come to this. So yeah, we want that to be pretty quick. Yeah.
That's good stuff. Well, I really appreciate what you've done here on this live stream today, and you've unpacked what you guys have done, and it's taken a lot to get there and a lot of trial and error. And you guys have really figured out what's worked, and you've proven it over and over again at multiple locations. There's going to be comments in the Facebook group. So for those of you listening to this, to catch these live streams and be able to do Q&A, definitely join our Facebook group, the Limitless Roofing CEO Facebook group. But before we part, Brad, knowing what you've known, your journey and what you're doing with Cornerstone, for somebody that's sitting back saying, hey, look, I'd love to scale to another city that's 10 hours away in another market, what's your parting piece of advice to that business owner?
Just do it. Just stop being scared of it. Like, you did it once in the city you're in, right? Like, yeah, okay, you need a little bit of cash to get an office, but there's ways around that. I mean, you could, in Little Rock, the first 60 days we were in an Airbnb. Like, why, that's maybe $1,500 for a monthly rate for an Airbnb, and you don't have to sign a year-long lease. Like, get your licenses, go get an Airbnb, hire a few guys. I mean, I had no problem hiring the first probably 6 or 7 or 8 guys in Little Rock by meeting with them at Starbucks and Panera and telling them, hey, we're working on getting an office. We're looking at real estate. We're in an Airbnb right now. And we met at the Airbnb every day, and we did our sales meetings there, and nobody thought anything of it. It's not like they thought, well, these aren't a real company, or these guys are, storm chasing or whatever. And so that's what I would say, like, jump off a cliff, man. Like, you've done it once. If you had a good profitable year, you've got a little cash stuck back, buy some extra yard signs and some extra shirts and find the right leader and go. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. And I think Hunter would say the same thing. I think that's why he's successful, is he will take the risk and he will jump off a cliff and he'll say, by God, why shouldn't it work? I've done it once. Let's go do it again, and there you go. Before you know it, you're at 6 or 7. So
good stuff. Well, Brad Barron, Chief Operating Officer of Cornerstone Construction, thank you so much for joining us.
Man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.